The wind howls outside your door as the moon disappears behind a cloud. You nod off in front of the dying fire, the book in your lap going limp against your knee. Suddenly, you hear a knock on the door. 3 even raps. You jerk awake. Was that your imagination? No, there it is again. Knock, knock, knock. And then you know the hard truth. Someone, perhaps you, will soon die. Banshee lore is peculiar and fascinating, and folklorist Stephen Rolfes is an expert in it. He'll share some deep knowledge about who banshees are and where they come from today on Homespun Haints. Hello, Hainted Loves. Welcome to Homespun Haints. I'm Becky.
Hey, I'm Diana.
Today we have a real treat for you guys. We are going to be talking to Stephen J. Rolfes, who wrote a very intriguing book on folklore called Beware the Banshees Cry. Oh, I think I peaked there. He's a folklorist, and he has all these really cool stories about banshees. And he opens up by telling us how I recently encountered one. I didn't even know it, but he had listened to some of our episodes and was like, oh yes, Becky, that was a banshee. And I'm like, oh my gosh. We're going to be talking to Stephen. He is so knowledgeable about this stuff. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it, especially if you like Irish folklore, if you like spooky things, or if you just like storytelling. And if you don't, why the hell are you listening to us?
You're no longer welcome on this podcast.
So, Diana, I'm also excited because, as you know, I'm getting ready to go to Italy.
Oh, yes, that's right. I can't wait. You said you were going to FaceTime me from the Vatican.
I will, and everybody who's on our Patreon can live vicariously because I will be sharing stories. And everywhere they'll let me film, especially if there's skeletons, I will be filming. So if you've been living under a rock for the last 2,000 years and you don't know what Pompeii is.
Which you have been if you lived there.
Yeah, that's right. Pompeii is a city in ancient Rome. It was a beachside city. It was a resort town.
That's always the excuse for building your city right under a volcano. Like, oh, there's a beach right there.
It was like our Myrtle Beach.
It's like Myrtle Beach.
Okay.
You mean Georgia's? Specifically Atlanta's? Or
No.
like the United States is...
Okay, what's a
direct comparison would be Myrtle Beach.
Okay, give me a nice beach in the U.S. Try.
Key West?
Okay, all right. Yeah, but it's hard to get to. Pompeii was like easy to get to. Anything? What can you drive to? Because like the Romans would have driven to this city.
In their Flintstones cars powered by feet.
Well,
I've never heard of driving a horse, but I really like that. I thought that was like something you do with cattle.
I wouldn't drive cattle to Pompeii, especially if you need to get out because the volcano's erupting. I mean, they don't go very fast. And
it's really hard to be stuck between a volcano and cattle. That's really not a good situation for being in a vehicle.
Okay, we are going nowhere with this. Okay, it was a beach resort town, and people did live there, just like people do live in Myrtle Beach or Miami Beach or Daytona Beach. I should have said Daytona Beach. Diana, you and I used to live there.
It's like Daytona Beach.
It's just like Daytona Beach, but without gasoline smears on the sand. And we could say that. We used to live there. God, that beach was gross. Back to Pompeii. All right, so 79 CE, this volcano erupted. People were like at the games. They were out doing their thing. They're like, oh, look, it's smoking. But nobody took it seriously. Everyone thought, meh, it does that sometimes. And it exploded, and it encased people in ash and incredibly preserved the city. You may have been able to see some of the plaster bodies that were uncovered, where they would pour plaster into the cavities left by the ash. And then when they would pull away the ash, they would have the perfect cast of a screaming Roman caught in his last moments of life. But what we didn't know up until this recent article was published in Nature magazine was that at least one of these unfortunate Romans, when he was covered in ash, his brain transformed into something that you could ideally make a vase or a window out of, should you plan to.
His brain, not his cranium?
His brain. His tissue in his brain transformed into glass.
What?
Yeah. Not his cranium.
What? Which tissue?
The brain tissue. I don't know.
Isn't it mostly fat?
I thought it was mostly water.
Water and fat, yeah. Well, I assumed the water didn't turn into glass. That'd be weird.
This report came out on February 27th, so I guess it's a little bit of old news. But it's not as old as...
It's okay. Don't worry about spoilers. I'm not going to read that.
Yeah, it's a very, very dense, science-y article in Nature. It's called Unique Formation of Organic Glass from a Human Brain in the Vesuvius Eruption of 79 CE. So that tells you right there what it was.
So it really is glass.
Glass. Yeah, so they found a skull, right?
Okay.
Oh, wait. They got a photo. They got a photo of this guy. So they actually found his skull, which is kind of rare considering like how hot this lava was. Maybe he was like on the outskirts. Maybe he was trying to get out and he got caught by those cattle. So regardless, he did not burn up as fast. So there's a little bit of his skull left and his brain turned to glass.
But how?
You can read the article.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
They have tested it and this material, and they have found that it does have brain makeup. It's got human hair fat, whatever that is. I'll quote here. The remnants on the skull are proven to be organic and human brain, owing to the preservation of proteins common in human brain tissue. Okay. That would be a clue. And fatty acids typical of both human brain triglycerides and human hair fat. That is something I never thought I would say, human hair fat. Wow. Moreover, exceptionally well-preserved complex networks of neurons, axons, and other neural structures have been revealed by a scanning electron microscope investigation of the remains.
Oh my gosh. So it contains neurons inside glass.
Mm-hmm. But
the guy's neurons, or it's just the neuron left a pattern in the glass? So it looks like a decorative paperweight with little neurons running through it.
Well, they don't go into that detail. They're looking at a high-powered microscope. They're looking at what looks like a chunk of obsidian. It looks like black glass, basically. And they can see the neural network. So I don't know if they can tell, like, if it's actually the neurons. It's probably the impression of the neurons. Kind of like, you know, how a fossil isn't actually bone. It's just what happens to the bone.
Right.
I'm
impression of bone.
So basically, the whole article is about them trying to like prove that it's glass and then figure out how the hell that happened, because apparently this is kind of a new thing. You know, I don't know if I've ever heard of brain turning to glass before.
Glass brain? Nope.
No. But hey, for those of you that are like science fiction writers, you should read this article because this will give you some great fodder for some great ideas.
That sounds like Agatha Christie, the glass brain. Of Pompeii.
Great historical fiction piece right about this guy's life.
Mm-hmm. And why he's the only one who had his brain turned to glass.
Well, you know, investigations are ongoing. They've only been digging at this site for about 300 years. They may find more glass brain people. Okay, so this is a tip. Archaeologist here, former archaeologist. Just a tip for those of you looking for glass brain people. Look for cattle tracks. Trust me.
Why?
Because the people trying to get out and the cattle that were in the way, they did the slow burn.
Okay.
Which is the only good David Bowie song on the album Heathen, by the way. Prove me wrong.
No, you're right. Well, that's a ideal situation. Brain turning to glass. I would love it if my brain turned to glass when I died. Wouldn't that be awesome? Your loved one could have a big brain paperweight instead of a stupid jar full of burned up pieces.
Yeah, but that would assume that you would be on vacation under a volcano without your loved one when you met your untimely demise, and 2,000 years had gone by before archaeologists discovered your brain and dug it up. So I think the chances of you having a glass brain and it actually ending up on your partner's mantelpiece is kind of slim.
I kind of wonder if the guy was like struck by lightning or something.
I know, right?
And it just like it created plasma like inside his skull and ricocheted around. And
just imagine.
you've never had plasma in your skull. You don't know what it feels like. So it could feel like your brain is turning to glass.
Maybe it was lava lightning.
Lava lightning.
Mm-hmm.
Prove us wrong. Even though that's two different types of damage, we think the same thing can produce both lightning and lava, and it's volcanoes.
Absolutely. We are excited to talk to Stephen here in a few minutes. But for those of you that aren't a member of our Patreon,
Look, a commercial.
are you tired of websites that have been Frankenstein together?
Oh, my website is so slow and creaky.
Every time I use the search bar, it just returns Abby Normal over and over again.
Becky's sister company, the Concept Spot, holds the secret to life itself and can create new life from nothing. In fact, we've been giving life to highly functional websites for the last 25 years using premium parts we swear we didn't salvage from graveyards.
Ooh, check out that header image. Instead of going, my new website purrs.
Need a blog? The Concept Spot can do that. Want an online store? We can do that too.
We build our sites from the cellular level. No reused templates or discarded body parts here, so we can make your site do whatever you want and look however you want.
It's gorgeous! I can't even see the stitches.
We can also resurrect your dead website if rigor mortis has set in.
Oh, it's like a new man.
If you think Homespun Haints is frighteningly genius, you should see our websites. Let your favorite ghoulish gals, Becky and Diana, build you a monstrous website that will wreak havoc on the internet for years to come.
Visit theconceptspot.com for more information.
It's live! It's live! Hello, Hainted Loves. Welcome to Homespun Haints. I'm Becky.
And I'm Diana.
Today on the show, we are thrilled to bring on author Stephen J. Rolfes, and he is author of Beware the Banshee's Cry, as well as 9 other, soon to be 10 other books. I'm really excited to talk to Stephen today and learn about banshees and so many other spooky things. So, Stephen, thank you so much for being here today with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Greetings and salutations. Now, before we go any further, I do want to put in one quick point.
Okay.
Yeah.
A few weeks back, you had a show with a very nice lady from Mississippi. And at the beginning, I forget who said it, one of the two of you talked about hearing 3 booms.
That was me.
That was you. Oh, okay.
Yeah, that happened in my backyard.
Backyard booms.
That sounds like the Irish death knock.
Oh,
Ooh.
no.
Oh, no.
The banshee's cry and these strange knocks will always come in groups of 3. And after they come within a day or two, or maybe right then, someone in the family is going to die. Of course, Becky, you don't have to worry because you're of German descent, as I am. Now, Diana might have a little problem there, because you have to be Irish to get a banshee.
Dang it.
So my Scottish ancestry isn't close enough. I'm safe.
Swing and a miss. Nope, it's got to be an O or a Mac, or no Irishman you be.
That banshee was obviously barking up the wrong house.
Talking of the 3 knocks, I do have one case from the 1940s and the city of Derry. And this is on the street. Now, you probably have people in Ireland listening to this. The name of the street was Fulton's Place, and it's very near the St. Columba's Church, which they called the Long Tower. Well, this was, I believe, right after World War II, and there was an elderly man who was pretty much dying that night, and the friends and the family came around, and one of the people who was there that night was a teenage girl. She's maybe about 13 or 14. And you two, having once been teenage girls yourselves, you would know that of all the places in the world you would want to be, that's probably down at the bottom of the list. But she had to sit there polite. She made her greetings and goodbyes to the man, and she's just sitting there. And suddenly she hears knocking at the door. And no one else is paying attention, and she's wondering, why the heck isn't anybody getting up and answering the door? It's probably someone with some food, and they're just kind of knocking, let me in. But no one notices. And this happened a second time, not too much, longer away. And finally, it happened a third time, and she said, well, even though this isn't my house, someone needs to get in. So she gets up, she walks to the door, and she opens it, and she sees an old, small woman wearing a cloak and walking away from the house. But all of a sudden, that lady stops. And she sensed that the door was open. She turned around and started to walk back towards the house now that the door was open. And, of course, the girl screamed and slammed the door and pretty much fainted away. Well, wouldn't you know that the man they had come to visit, well, he died later that evening. And apparently that was the death knock coming for him.
Whoa.
If she hadn't opened the door, would you speculate the man wouldn't have died?
Oh, no. When the Banshee comes, it's done.
I see.
They're just announcing it.
Ah, got it. I grew up in Appalachia, and there we have a tradition. The same thing, if you hear the 3 knocks, don't open the door because you'll invite, not Banshee, but whatever the derivative is, in, and then a death could occur. So you can avoid the death by not opening the door in Appalachia.
In French Brittany, there is a very dark spirit known as Ankou. And he is pretty much what our modern Grim Reaper is based on, but instead of a hood, he has a wide-brimmed cap. And he goes about at night on these old country roads in a creaky cart filled with souls. And he will come up to the house of the person that is destined to die, and he'll knock on the door 3 times. And you definitely don't want to invite him in.
Okay. So that's the one that comes knocking that you don't want to let in, Becky.
Okay.
I think we might have heard of Ankou at one point before. It's part of the Unseelie Court and the Wild Hunt, right?
Well, it's funny that you mention the Wild Hunt, because in Ireland there is something known as the Coach a Bower. Now, the Coach a Bower is said to be an elegant, wonderful coach. If you remember those fantastic movies from Mario Bava at the beginning of the 60s, with the elegant coaches being driven by phantoms, well, this would be like it. And quite often, it is a Banshee who is riding in it. The person driving the coach looks perfectly normal, except he doesn't have a head. Now, if you would ever hear the Wild Hunt, the Hawaiian Night Marchers, or the Coach a Bower, you must definitely throw yourself to the ground and put your hands up and don't look. Don't look at what it is. Otherwise, it'll stop and it'll take you along. Unless you want to go riding with Odin or going with the Night Marchers or the Coach a Bower, yeah, just hide on the ground.
Whew. Where does it take you?
To hell.
Wherever they go, no one is it to come back to tell us.
No, we're not supposed to know.
Stephen, how did you get interested in banshees, since you're obviously a scholar on banshees and other folklore?
I love folklore. I love Ireland. I'm going back next year. I can't wait to get there. But yes, banshees are something that people have heard about. They say the old expression to scream like a banshee, but very few people know much about them. So I spent a lot of time and I came up with hundreds of cases of meeting the banshee. But I'll tell you one thing now, something that I have never figured out is what is a banshee? Now, it can be one of three things. One, it could be the ghost of a ancestor, maybe a few hundred years ago, who either loved the family so much they want to help their passing from this world to the next, or it could be someone who hated the family and takes utter delight in announcing their deaths. And I have a lot of cases of that in the book. Or number two, it could be one of the fairies, the Tuatha de Danann, what they call the Sidhe, the dwellers in the mound. In fact, the name Banshee is two words, Banshee, which means the woman from the mound. And that's not a pile of dirt. That is the fairy mound. Mm-hmm. And this is the most interesting and the one I think your watchers and listeners will love. It might be a Celtic goddess, because there are a number of Celtic goddesses who have apparently, with the coming of Christianity, they retired, and part of their 401k is that they get to be a banshee. Now, one of these is the goddess Aine, which I apologize to the Irish. I'm no doubt mispronouncing it. Forgive me, I'm German. But Aine was the goddess about right now, of spring, of summer, of fertility, of the animals, of the crops, of the people. In other words, all of the good stuff. And she was connected to the no one saw that, Fitzgerald and the O'Cara families. And she had a fairy mound near Knockany, which is in County Limerick. And if you like folklore and ancient rituals, there was a ritual that survived way in the historic times through the 1800s, probably well into the 1900s. On midsummer, this might be midsummer or it might be right around Beltane, people of the area would gather at this mound and they would perform like a dance, a ritual, and then they would have torches. And they would take these torches and they would go scattering off in different directions and going into the different fields. That way you were bringing the fertilizing power of Aine to the different farms and the fields. And now she is a banshee. And also, I won't give the story now, but I'll just say in the book, I have another goddess named Cleona. And I have an incredible story, a hilarious story, actually, about her. And she's now a banshee, too. So it's one of three things: a ghost, a fairy, or an ancient goddess.
Why do you think a goddess would, especially one who's about life and fertility, become this harbinger of death in her retirement?
It is interesting to note, studying mythology, a lot of times goddesses who are connected to life and fertility are also death goddesses.
Okay.
And I'll give you one very familiar example of that is Aphrodite. She was also a death goddess. And keep in mind the corn goddess Demeter, who was her daughter, Kor, or as we know her, Persephone, who became the queen of the dead.
Mm,
So, yes, you have life and death together in the same symbolic person.
interesting.
That does make sense. So, how far back do stories of banshees go?
The oldest one that I could find, I'm sure it goes much further than that, was from the ancient Ireland and the story of the great Irish hero Cuchulainn. Now, you've probably heard his name. They say that Cuchulainn is the Irish Heracles. But personally, I think that Heracles is the Greek Cuchulainn. Now, he saw the goddess. Now, this is one that, stop me if you've heard her name before, Morrigan,
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
who is actually three separate goddesses. Nemon, who created panic among soldiers. Maka, who spent her time usually as a crow flying in circles above a battlefield waiting for dinner to be served, and Baub, who was the great washerwoman. And Morrigan fell in love with Cuchulainn, the big, strong He-Man hero, but he didn't want anything to do with her because he was in the middle of war. He spent a lot of time in war. And on his last battle, Cuchulainn was walking with the druid Cathbad, and they saw out in the stream a woman who was washing the clothes and the armor of a warrior. Now, this armor and clothing was just covered in blood, and the water was turning scarlet around her. And Cathbad said, "Look, Cuchulainn, you know whose clothes he's washing? Why, that's yours. That means that if you go ahead and you fight in this battle, you will die for certain. Come, let's turn around and let's go back, because you're not going to live." Well, Cuchulainn turn around, run away from a battle. That beagle is not hunting. He said, "You want to go? Fine. Safety is that way. The battle's this way. That's where I'm headed." So he goes, and you're going to love this. There is a standing stone on top of a mound. Now, if you're into the ley theory, you know this is where the ley lines go. This is the spiritual power. Well, he walked up to it, took off his belt, put it around the stone, and he fastened himself to that stone. That way, when he fell, he would not touch the earth. Not to touch the earth and not to see the sun, from Sir James Fraser. Well, he started the fight, and the enemy was rushing up on him. Spears were piercing him, arrows were piercing him, but he just kept fighting. But he was slowing down bit by bit, and then he wasn't moving. And there was a whole pile of dead bodies in front of him, and the enemy soldiers were saying, "Is he resting? Can we attack, or is he suddenly going to come out and start slicing again?" Well, flying overhead, who should be there but the Banshee goddess Morrigan? And she's in the form of a crow. And she says, as every woman has said in their lives at least once, if you want something done right, you gotta do it yourself. So she flew down, landed right on his head, and they knew that the great Cuchulainn was dead, but his body did not touch the earth.
Oh, did that prevent them from being able to conquer him somehow?
It had a spiritual significance
Okay.
that he was still upright.
You mentioned you had a whole stack of Banshee stories that you would like to share
Oh.
with us.
Remember, I told you about the ghosts who hate their families?
Right.
Well, the Lady Fanshawe, back in the year 1649, she saw just such a banshee. Now, you may not have heard the name Lady Fanshawe, but you certainly enjoy her product because she was the first person in the English language to come up with the recipe for ice cream.
Ah.
And this was in, where are we at? County Cork. She was visiting a castle owned by the O'Brien family. And this was a very old, ancient castle. It even had this big moat in front of it. Well, she was there visiting with the O'Briens, and at nighttime they became tired. She went up to bed. She got into bed, no doubt dreaming of sugary treats. And suddenly she hears this wailing and crying outside of her window. Problem is, she's on the second floor,
Uh-oh.
and and there's a moat. So okay, she gets up, she walks out, opens up the curtains, and she sees this beautiful Irish girl with red hair that's floating around like she's underwater, and this lady is floating in air, and she's looking in. She's looking in at Lady Fanshawe's clothes. Well, the fact that you've been dead for a few centuries doesn't mean you can't keep up with the latest fashion. And then all of a sudden the lady lets out another scream. And Lady Fanshawe is like shaking at this point. And then the Irish girl floats backwards into the air. And then a third time she lets out a scream. And then she vanishes. And Lady Fanshawe closes the curtains and say, okay, I'm going to get a good night's sleep now. Well, in the morning, she goes down and she has breakfast, and here's her host that comes in, and they're talking, and she said, now, I had the strangest thing happen to me last night. Oh, he said, yes, and she explained what happened. And he had a very guilty look on his face. And he said, yes, you saw the O'Brien family banshee.
Oh.
We had someone in the castle. One of our family was dying last night. But we didn't want to bother you because we knew you wouldn't stay. So we put him in another part of the castle. And, well, he passed away last night. The banshee that you saw was from a few hundred years earlier. There was a prince, or, the young heir, baron, or whatever, of the O'Brien family. He fell in love, and he married the local girl, a peasant. Now, back then, it was not like a Hallmark Christmas movie.
Yeah.
If you were nobility, you did not marry the common people. And he brought her in, and they were legally married. No one could kick her out. But the family just gave him pure hell. How could you disgrace the family by doing this? You're supposed to marry the daughter of this baron over there so we can get an alliance. And no, you had to fall in love. Well, finally, he got tired of all of the nagging, and he had his young wife drowned in the moat. Now, personally, I think marrying beneath your station, that's not as bad as murdering your wife.
Right.
But maybe it was a little different back then.
What a solution.
How about from 1879, right here in Cincinnati?
Wait, what?
Yep. Oh, you don't have to be in Ireland so long as you are of the family, an Irish family pure through and through, and your family has a Banshee. It doesn't matter where you go, the Banshee will come and see you. Well, they had a guy named Mr. Gaylor, and he went into the city hospital and he said, "Can you give me a tour?" I said, "Oh, okay. Well, usually we don't do this," but they took him around and he was impressed. They said, "Why exactly did you want a tour?" He said, "Well, I heard the family Banshee the other night, and I know I'm probably going to wind up here, but your facilities look great. I'll be seeing you soon." He walked out. They never saw him, but they did see a Banshee in animal form.
Okay.
A black cat suddenly appeared in the hospital, and everyone loved him. The janitors, the doctors, the nurses, attendants, everyone had their little black cat pet. But then they noticed something very weird. All of a sudden, at night, the cat would just go crazy, run around circles, screeching and such. And as soon as it did that, someone in the hospital would die.
Oh.
And they had to remove the body. And this happened like a dozen times. And all of a sudden, that cat was not quite as popular as it had been before. Finally, the cat just left of its own, and nobody was in the least bit sorry.
That's amazing. Because you hear about cats who will detect people who are about to die because of some metabolic shift or something like that and go cuddle up with them. But the idea that it was screaming, specifically the cat was screaming like a banshee.
I heard another animal type story of this, and I could not put it in the book because I read it years ago. I mean, over my lifetime, I've read so many books. I think the name of the book was called Passing Strange, but I haven't had time to dig it up. But there was a family in New England, Irish family, maybe they were in Boston, and it was just a regular suburban family. And one day, a German Shepherd dog appeared. And everyone in the family is playing with the dog and having a wonderful time, except the grandmother. She was from the old country, and she saw that dog and she wanted nothing to do with it. And finally, the dog just left of its own accord, and as soon as it did, they got word that a close relative in Ireland had passed away. And the grandmother said, "You idiots, that was a Banshee."
So it visited the family completely on the other side of the world.
Oh, yes, yes.
Oh,
when you
my.
hear the Banshee or see it, you don't know if it's coming for you, someone in your immediate family, or someone in the more extended family.
Okay.
I do have a rather humorous Banshee motif. Now, you two may have been told this when you were little, that if you see a comb on the ground, never pick it up. Leave it right there. Becky, yes. And you're the German. Okay. But there is a belief the most treasured possession of a Banshee is her comb.
Huh.
And sometimes she's a little careless and she'll drop it. And if you grew up in Ireland and you see a comb on the ground and you happen to be with your grandmother or something, it'll be, don't you dare pick that up. That could be from a banshee. And there is a folk motif which talks about a drunken Irishman. I know that's an impossibility.
Yeah, never heard of that.
Coming home from the pub one night, and he sees a banshee combing her long hair, which is what they are often seen doing.
That's why they scream so much.
And he says, well, now that comb, that'll be something to show the boys back at the pub. So he sneaks up behind, grabs the comb, goes running off to his house, saying, ha ha, look what I got. And of course, the banshee is not happy with this. And she starts to chase after him. And he gets home just in time and slams the door and locks it. And then she takes what's called a beetle, which is what you use to pound clothing, the old-fashioned way to wash before, West Point and such. And she throws that beetle at the house, and it crashes and big boom, everything shakes, dishes are falling and breaking, and here comes the family down the steps say, okay, what mischief are you up to today? And why is somebody shooting off artillery in the front yard? Well, he said, look what I got. And the wife looks at him and says, oh my God, Mother told me to marry well, but no, I was in love. I had to pick the village idiot. So now what are they going to do? They have a very angry banshee who wants her comb back. So naturally, being good Catholics, you go to the priest. And the priest said, first thing, you gotta give that comb back. But don't, under any circumstances, touch her or let her touch you.
Okay.
All righty. So they figure it out when she's outside pounding on the door. They take the iron tongs from the fireplace. They put the comb in the tongs and they slide it under the door. And all of a sudden, it's like you have a great white shark at the other end. And they pull back 2 iron rods.
Oh.
She got her comb back and she took half of the tong with her. And now he has something to show the boys down at the pub.
I didn't know there was a type of fairy that could touch iron. That's a surprising twist.
Yes. Iron, spirits, fairies, ghosts, demons cannot touch iron. That is why if you go to an old cemetery, it is surrounded by an iron fence. Not necessarily to keep the people out, which it wants to do, but to keep the spirits in.
Mm-hmm. Maybe this was one of the goddess banshees that doesn't have to follow the spirit rules.
Maybe it was Ene or Cleona, yes.
Exactly.
So there's not just one banshee then. Every family has their own banshee.
Oh, specific families, right?
Yes, it has to be a certain specific family. Mm-hmm. And there are actually lists of this. One of the books that I researched for this by modern folklorist Patricia Lyslott, she has the complete list in the back. And I give a lot of the names in my book. Let me see, Devereaux is there, Flynn, O'Brien, of course, that we spoke of.
So this is a good reason to not be Irish.
Oh, you're not going to get away.
Yeah, you can't just not be Irish.
Now, Becky and I, we would have to worry about an entity known as the Weissfrau, the White Lady. And this is from Germany, and there are plenty of beautiful Gothic tales of this lady in white gliding down the chambers in the evening, you sometimes holding a candle, and when you see her, you know that someone in the family is going to die. Oh, that reminds me of a story right there. One of the most famous of German families is the Hohenzollern, where the Kaiser was from during World War I. This was his ruling family. And his family had a Weissefrau who would announce their deaths. And one day there was one of the princesses of the family I believe they were in the Neuschloss might have been in Austria. And she was fixing her hair in the mirror and trying on a hat. And she saw out of the corner of her eye someone was walking. She figured it was one of the servants. And she just asked, what time is it? And suddenly she heard this ghostly voice say, "It is 10 o'clock, my love." And she turned around and dressed all in white. There was the Hohenzollern Weissefrau. And within a few days, she was dead.
So a Weissefrau is equivalent. It's basically the German Banshee.
Oh, you find death messengers all over the world. And I'll give you one that you might see in Oklahoma.
Okay.
La Llorona.
Yes.
You've heard of her, the
yeah.
Weeping Lady, the Mexican version of the Medea myth.
Right.
Well, if you hear her, that means that someone, either you or someone in your close family, is going to be dying soon.
Oh, wow. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for sharing all of this. Stephen has written multiple books and, as you can tell, is incredibly knowledgeable about folklore from all over the world, especially when it has to do with harbingers of death. Stephen's book, Beware the Banshee's Cry, is recently released, I believe. We will have links to all of Stephen's books on our website, in our show notes, and in the description below. So, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today. This was lovely. I'm so glad we got a chance to talk to you.
Well, thank you for having me. I hope I can come on after the next book.
We'll see you again shortly. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for the interview today. And Hainted Loves, what do you think? Would you answer the door if you heard 1, 2, 3 knocks? Because I think you probably have a spooky day.
Homespun Haints is hosted by Becky Kielimnik and Diana Doty, and produced by Homespun Haints Media LLC. Editing and music by Becky Kielimnik. Show notes by Diana Doty. If you have a ghost story and you'd like to be considered as a guest for this podcast, please visit our website at homespunhaints.com/submit.